Hey there, I'm Maddie. Welcome. So today we're tackling a question that, well, it seems super simple at first glance, but it's actually got some pretty deep layers. And that question is, what is history? Now, you might think, oh, it's just a list of dates and famous people, right? I promise you it is so much more than that. Let's dive in. All right, so let's just jump right in with a thought experiment. When you use the word history, what do you really mean? Are you talking about everything that has ever happened? Or are you talking about the story we tell about what happened? Because, and this is the key to everything we're talking about today, those are two completely different things. Yeah, seriously.
Okay, so this really breaks it down for us. On one side, you've got the past. Think of it as everything, every single event, big and small, that has ever happened. It's done. It's over. It is static, unchangeable, totally set in stone. But then, on the other side, you have a history. And that's the narrative we build about the past. It's an interpretation, and because of that, it can absolutely change. The past is fixed, but history, our story about it, is constantly being rewritten.
So, if history is a story, that raises a pretty big question, doesn't it? How do historians actually write it? I mean, it's not like they have a time machine. Well, this is where they put on their detective hats. They're basically investigators, piecing together clues to figure out what happened and why. So let's open up their detective kit and see what's inside. Okay, so just like any good detective, the #1 rule of the investigation is you gotta examine the evidence. For historians, this evidence is called sources. These are the fundamental building blocks, the raw materials they use to even begin telling a story. But, as you're about to see, not all evidence is the same.
So, that toolkit basically has two main trays. First up, you have primary sources. These are the real deal. They're artifacts from the time period being studied. We're talking diaries, letters, eyewitness accounts, official documents, even an old piece of pottery. It's the raw, unfiltered stuff. Then, you've got secondary sources. These are things that analyze or interpret the primary sources. Think textbooks, articles, or biographies written way later. The lawyer analogy is perfect here. A primary source is like an eyewitness on the stand, and a secondary source is the historian's final argument to the jury, explaining what that testimony means.
All right, so you've got your hands on what looks like a soldier's diary from a famous battle. Amazing! But, hold on, the work isn't over. In fact, it's just getting started. How do you know it's real? And even if it is real, how do you know you can trust what the soldier wrote? This is where the real interrogation begins. It's a process called source criticism. And this process has two key steps. Step 1 is external criticism. This is all about the source as a physical object. They're asking, is this thing even authentic? Is the ink right? Is the paper from the correct era? Or is it a clever fake? Then, once they've confirmed it's legit, they move to step 2, internal criticism. Now they're looking at the content itself. They're asking things like, was the person who wrote this actually there? Did they have a reason to lie or, stretch the truth? And, just as important, what are they not saying? And believe me, that second step is absolutely crucial. Here's a perfect and kind of funny example. You've probably heard of Herodotus. He's this ancient Greek guy, traditionally called the father of history. Sounds pretty impressive, right? Well, he's also been called the father of lies. Why? Because he had a tendency to include some, let's just say, fantastical stories in his work. It's just a fantastic reminder that you have to question everything, even a source from the father of history himself. Okay, so our detective historian has done the legwork. They've found their sources, they've checked them for authenticity, they've analyzed them for bias, so now they just write down what happened, right? Simple? Well, not so fast. Because even with the exact same evidence, the final story really depends on the storyteller. And this is where it gets really interesting. See, history isn't some single settled story that's locked away in a vault. It's much more like an ongoing conversation, or sometimes a full-blown argument. You can have different historians look at the very same set of facts, but because they bring their own questions and their own perspectives to the table, they can come away with totally different interpretations. And these different perspectives often get grouped into what we call schools of thought. Think of them like different camera lenses you can use to view the same event. For instance, a Marxist historian might put on their class struggle lens and see the past as a story of economics. A feminist historian uses a gender lens to bring the experiences of women into focus. Someone from the Annals School might use a super wide-angle lens, looking at huge long-term trends like climate, instead of individual people. None of them are necessarily wrong, they're just highlighting different and equally important parts of the same complex picture.
So, what have we figured out? History is this super complex story. It's built on real evidence, sure, but it's also shaped by the person telling it, which, might lead you to ask a pretty fair question. Yeah, that one. If it's all just a complicated story with a bunch of different authors and interpretations, why bother? What's the point of it all? And that's a great question. The answer, I think, is that the value of history is because of its complexity, not in spite of it.
So why do we do it? Well, yeah, there's the classic reason, to learn from the past so we don't repeat the same mistakes. That's a big one. But it goes so much deeper. It's about trying to understand the whole human condition in all its messy, amazing diversity. It's how we build a collective identity, a sense of who we are, and crucially, it's a tool for challenging comfortable myths and really trying to get closer to the truth.
Ultimately, that's what it boils down to. History isn't some dusty academic thing about people who lived a long time ago. It's really about us. It's like holding up a mirror to ourselves. The stories we tell about where we came from, they don't just explain the past. They define who we are right now in this very moment. So, I'll leave you with this final thought. If history is the story we tell ourselves to understand who we are, what's the story we're telling right now? Think about it. What narratives are shaping our world today? Whose stories are being told, and just as importantly, whose are being ignored? The answers to those questions tell us everything about who we are becoming. Thanks so much for joining me.